Hello and guten Tag, mein Freunde. I'm Peter and here I'm telling you stories about the most interesting European cars of the 80s and 90s. Today we're talking about a car surrounded with a lot of controversies and weird things, Volkswagen Scirocco. One of them is the fact that there is not very much of Volkswagen in this car. The platform was initially developed by Audi together with Mercedes-Benz. The body was created by Italian car designer Giorgetto Giugiaro, and the car itself was manufactured not by Volkswagen, but by the independent company Karmann. By the way, do you know that the most selling part in Volkswagen's part catalog is a part with the part number 19939850008? Volkswagen sells more than 6 million of these parts every year. And this part is Volkswagen Currywurst. Yes, Volkswagen makes its own sausages for its employees and sells them through many stores in Europe too, even through dealerships. And they have their own ketchup too. And yes, it also has an official part number. And by the way, this fact had a great influence to the name of my channel. But let's get back to the cars. The Scirocco had 3 generations. Well, actually 4, but the 3rd generation is known under different name, and it is also one of the weird things about this car. The 1st generation was produced from 1974 to 1981, the 2nd one from 1981 to 1992, and the 3rd official generation was made from 2008 to 2017. There was another one that was being developed during the 80s, but Volkswagen eventually decided to launch it under different name, Volkswagen Carrada. On this channel we speak about the cars of the 80s and 90s, so I will not talk about the last generation of Scirocco. And Volkswagen Carrada deserves a separate story. It was a cool car, by the way. So today we will talk mainly about the 2nd generation of Scirocco, but we have to briefly speak about the 1st gen too, just to understand where it all came from. And the history of appearance of this car is controversial again. There are 2 versions of this story. Both start with the development of Volkswagen Golf. In the 1960s, Volkswagen bought the Auto Union company who owned the brand Audi, and they wanted to use the front-wheel drive platform developed by Audi to make a new small Volkswagen car to replace the famous Volkswagen Beetle. Beetle was a great car and Volkswagen made a whole pile of money on it, but it was obvious at that time that they needed something more modern because customers wanted something new. So they took a very modern front-wheel drive platform developed by Audi with participation of Mercedes-Benz, updated it, and decided to make a compact family hatchback on this platform. The platform was named A1 by the way, and the car on this platform was Volkswagen Golf. To create the body of the new car, they invited an Italian car designer Giorgetto Giugiaro. This name I already mentioned many times, because he also created Lancia Delta, Saab 9000 and many other iconic cars of the 70s, 80s and 90s. And here some mystery and uncertainty appears in the story. By one version, Volkswagen ordered only 2 designs to Giugiaro, a small hatchback which we know as Golf or Rabbit in the United States, and larger car which we know as Volkswagen Passat. But Giugiaro drawn the 3rd car, a small sportish car, something between a 3-door hatchback and sport coupe. Volkswagen didn't want to make this 3rd car, but one of contractors of Volkswagen decided to invest their own money and build the sport coupe using the A1 platform of Volkswagen Golf. This contractor was a company named Karmann. They produced convertible versions of Volkswagen Beetle for a long time. They also made a very interesting sport coupe Karmann Ghia on the chassis of the Beetle. By the way, they also were making Porsche 911, 912 and 914, but this is not related to the story. Anyway, in the beginning of the 70s they also needed something new, and here they saw the prototype of Giorgetto Giugiaro rejected by Volkswagen. So they made a bet, invested into production of this car and actually won. The car named Volkswagen Scirocco was sold in a quantity of almost 800,000 units during the 70s and 80s, what puts it on the top of the list of cars made by Karmann ever. By the way, all Sciroccos was produced by Karmann and not by Volkswagen itself. But there is another version of the story. It says that Volkswagen planned to order designs for 3 cars from the very beginning and paid for them as well as for the full development of Scirocco. And it was Volkswagen's decision to produce the car at Karmann's plant because they just wanted to free their own production lines for the Golf. In any case, a new sport car on the platform of Volkswagen Golf was presented at Geneva Motor Show in 1973 and went into production in the beginning of 1974, about 2 months before its big brother Volkswagen Golf, which Volkswagen renamed to Rabbit for American market for unexplainable reasons. Volkswagen managers decided to launch Scirocco earlier than Golf because they expected lower interest to this car and they wanted to test new mechanical solutions and correct mistakes before the launch of Golf. By the way, the English Wikipedia and some other sources say that Scirocco was launched 6 months before the Golf, but this is incorrect. The difference between these cars was just about 2 months. The first generation of Scirocco was met rather warmly by the customers. 504,000 cars were sold in total. Not that bad for a very small 3-door car which was more expensive than the Golf on top of that. It was of course a very small number in comparison with 8 million Golfs sold at the same time, but still not bad. The first Scirocco had a very wide range of engines which were different for different markets, from 1.1 liter to 1.7 liter and from 50 to 110 horsepower. The car was very modern mechanically for its time and the quality was very high, even better than the quality of cars made by Volkswagen itself, and they were very good in the 70s and 80s. The most interesting version of the first generation of Scirocco is Volkswagen Scirocco GTi, launched in June of 1976, also several months earlier than these 3 magical letters appeared on Volkswagen Golf, starting the whole era of hot hatches. So the first real hot hatch was not the Golf GTi as many think, but Scirocco GTi, if you consider it a hatchback and not a coupe of course. Scirocco GTi had 1.6 liter engine with mechanical fuel injection producing 110 horsepower. It had better tires, ventilated brakes, better cooling system and better anti-roll bars. The GTi could reach 186 km per hour or 116 miles per hour. The information about 0 to 60 miles per hour acceleration is different in various sources. Some of them say 10 seconds, others claim 8.8 seconds. The car was very light, less than 1700 pounds, and the power of the engine was more than enough to give the driver a lot of fun and joy, considering perfect handling of the car. In the late 70s, Volkswagen decided to update the Scirocco. 3 different designs were considered: a new design from Giorgetto Giugiaro, a design proposed by Karmann, and the design of internal design team of Volkswagen. Eventually, it was decided to go with the Volkswagen's own design. This decision is also considered controversial by car historians, but frankly speaking, I personally think that it was the right one. Other designs were still inspired by the 70s, and the Volkswagen's version was clearly newer and more modern. At the same time, the new Scirocco was still made on the old A1 platform of the first Golf. The Golf itself got a new, updated platform A2 in 1983, but Scirocco used the old platform until the end of its production in 1992. One more weird decision, by the way. So, in March of 1981, the second-gen Scirocco was presented to the public at Geneva Motor Show, and the sales started later the same year. And it was actually kind of a failure. The sales were 25% lower than expected. The new car was larger and more comfortable, but it was 200 pounds heavier. It had modern look and better aerodynamics, but still had an old platform and old engines under the new body. It was positioned as a sport coupe, but it wasn't very fast. Even the most powerful GTE version decreased its performance because of heavy weight. More and more controversies. And it was rather expensive. It was more expensive than more practical Golf, which on top of that received a technical update in 1983. And it was more expensive than the first generation of Scirocco, being actually slower. Some customers wanted a cheap entry-level trim level, others wanted a really performance-oriented car with powerful engine and turbocharger, but Scirocco had none of this. The interest to this car increased for some time when a new engine with 16 valves became available in July of 1985. The 1.8-liter engine with double overhead camshafts could produce 139 horsepower. The next year, another version of this engine with a catalytic converter appeared, and its power decreased to 129 horsepower. The top speed was 204 km per hour or 128 miles per hour for cars without the catalyst, and 200 km per hour or 125 miles per hour with it. The 0 to 60 was 8.1 and 8.5 seconds accordingly. Actually not that bad at the time for a car without a turbocharger. In fact, if you ever want to buy a Scirocco, these are the versions you should look for. GTi and GTX trim levels were fast, but not that fast frankly speaking. you should look for GTX 16V with 139 horsepower or GTX 16V Cut, also known as GT2, with 129 horsepower. Unfortunately, the appearance of these engines didn't give Scirocco a long-term prosperity in sales, considering all other controversies we talked about and the age of the platform of the car. And Volkswagen knew this. So, in May of 1981, right after launch of the second generation of Scirocco, they started development of the third generation on the platform of the second Golf. The new car was ready in 1986 and went into production in 1988. But it was much more expensive than Scirocco and very different technically. So, Volkswagen decided to launch the third generation under different name and make it a premium car in Volkswagen's product line. The first name option was Typhoon, because Volkswagen wanted to name cars after various types of winds. But then they decided to drop the Typhoon name because typhoons always related to destructions. And for any reason they decided to name it Carrada after the Spanish word carrer, meaning to run. The Carrada actually was a very interesting car, but we will speak about it someday in the future. Don't know when yet. It's interesting that the second generation of Scirocco was produced together with its successor Carrada during 4 years, more than the half of lifetime of Carrada. Although Scirocco was discontinued in the United States in 1988, it still was in production at Karmann's plant in Osnabrück, Germany until September 7, 1992. So, with all the strange and controversial things, was the second generation of Scirocco good or bad? The short answer that I heard from many owners of Scirocco: it is a really cool car. It is not the fastest car on the planet, but it handles really perfectly in corners. And in GTi and GTX versions, especially with 16 valves, it isn't slow. Probably it would be great to have a turbocharger there, and I don't know why Volkswagen didn't put it there, but it is still fast enough considering its weight. By the way, Volkswagen actually made some crazy experiments with this car. They even installed 2 engines in Scirocco, one for the front wheels, another one for the rear axle. This car was called Scirocco Bimotor. They clearly targeted this monster for the famous Group B of the World Rally Championship, but this car actually never competed there and never was put in production. But even a simple road version of Scirocco is a car that loved by many of owners. Yes, it's small, really small and maybe not so comfortable, but it's simple and reliable, with enough space for 2 people and a lot of luggage. Yes, it has some weirdness in its history, but this car now also gives you some feeling of being unique and special, because there are not many of them still on the road now. And at the end of the day, it is that controversies and weird things that make this car really interesting for car enthusiasts now. Although Scirocco was sold in the United States at the time of production, it may be challenging to find a good example inside the country now. But they are all older than 25 years now, and you can legally import one from Europe. This may be especially interesting because this car were produced in Germany for 4 years after they were discontinued in the United States, and they were the best and the most powerful versions of Scirocco. So, if you want a Scirocco, and you are looking for one with 16 valves and manual transmission, probably the only one you should look for, take a look at the European market. And as always, there is no need to wait because the offering is melting with the time. In the UK, you can buy Scirocco with a 16 valves engine for 5 to 8,000 British pounds now, but there are not many of them there. In continental Europe, it will be from 7 to 20,000 euros depending on the mileage and condition. The cars with smaller engines may be cheaper, starting from just 2-3,000 euros and up to the same 12, again depending on the condition. You may find better offers if you search deeper and have someone with good connections in Europe. And by the way, if you'd like to buy the Scirocco or any other car from Europe and import it to the United States, I probably can help you with this. Check out our website with all details by the link in the description under this video. Well, thank you very much for watching. So, what you are thinking about Volkswagen Scirocco? Have you driven one? I know that many people had them as first cars because they were cheap at some point but still reliable. Tell me please about your experience in the comments below. And if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. New interesting stories are coming soon. Danke schön, mein Freunde, and see you next time.